So today I am painting the Jon Snow miniature from the Song of Ice and Fire miniature game. Very specifically, not the Game of Thrones miniature game. The company that makes the Song of Ice and Fire miniature game has the book rights, not the show rights. That's how they made their game, so it is specifically a Song of Ice and Fire. I will most likely call it Game of Thrones at least several times throughout the day. But technically, it is the Song of Ice and Fire miniature game. So, I'm going to be doing a technique today, and as you can see, I've already begun that process. I primed the miniature dark brown. Well, maybe not super dark, like a chestnut brown. And then, there, you can see it there. And then from above, what we call a zenithal priming, is I took some white paint and sprayed it from above, as you can see there. It looks pretty white there, pretty brown there. And that just starts the shading and highlighting process that we're going to go with. But we're going to use a second layer of this. So I'm going to get some, my favorite go-to white recently, Vampiric Highlight. Just going to put some of this out on the palette. And then we're going to go through a process here. So we're just going to take this white that we have, very pale white, and highlight along the edges everything on him to give us a second highlight layer. And then we're going to go back and colorize all the bits. So I'm just going to start, sort of, doesn't really matter, anywhere. And just going to highlight the raised edges with this paint. And as you can see, those edges are brighter than the, obviously brighter than the brown, but also brighter than the white primer that we sprayed from above. So this will give us the brown will be our shadow. The white primer will be our midtone, and this will be our highest highlight. And you could do this, you could go beyond this and do it like with more colors. So that you had generally like professional painters or competition painters like to think of a 1 through 5 system, so that you have a highlight, a very base color, and then 3 colors in between. So you could do that sort of thing. I'm just going to go for these 3 though. That works just fine for me. So I'm just highlighting, I don't have to highlight every raised edge, but I'm just highlighting a good bit of them, just so that we have a good contrast on all the pieces. So I'll just do his sleeve, then I'll do a couple little lines there, then on his glove. And this is this figure is when Jon is in the Night Watch. So he's going to be a pretty dark figure. Not necessarily monochromatic, but he's not going to have any bright colors on him. And so this is going to help us out even more, differentiating these super dark colors against each other. And it will also lighten the darker colors so that we aren't just left with a completely dark miniature, which sometimes can sell, but not what I'm going for. So I'm just going to keep doing this process all over. And this, if you watched last week when I did my second Blue Wizard, we did some contrast paint, and then we went back in and highlighted a bunch of places of that contrast paint. This is basically doing the same thing, but in reverse, and with a much lower amount of paint. So last week, say I did red contrast, blue contrast, brown contrast, and green contrast. I would then need to go and find a brown, a red, a blue, and a green to highlight all of them. In this, using this technique, this white highlights everything because the contrast paint is going to go over it, and these will all read as the brightest form of those colors. So you can basically do all your highlighting now and not have to worry about it later. I believe this is similar. I'm not 100% familiar with the sketch style of painting, but I believe this is similar to that. You go in and you sketch out basically all your shadows and highlights and then come back in with glazes. Glazes are a bit more complicated than just contrast paint though, so I won't go too much into that. I don't fully understand the sketch style, and I'm no good at glazing because it involves thinning down your paint, and I'm no good at that either. So just going to keep highlighting here. On parts that I know I'm going to want to be lighter, like this cloak here, this fur cloak, I'm imagining it's sheep wool. I know I'm going to want it to be lighter, so I'm going to spend a little more time making sure there's a bunch of this white on the different parts of the cloak here. I need to see, there's this ring right here. I'm not sure what that is. It may be like an oversized hood that he pulls up. I'm not sure, but I'll probably just paint it as part of the fur here. And the zenithal that we did, the brown undercoat and then the white from above, shows us really where to put these bits of white. So like, this is a good example. Right here, this I've already put white on, but right here, for instance, I haven't touched it in any way. And as you can see, it's already quite dark. So I don't need a lot of this third color on there because it would be in shadow based on our zenithal. And I guess I might need to explain this if you're new to painting, or if you just aren't fully knowledgeable in zenithal. The way zenithal works is you spray it from above, because typically on Earth the sun is above you, and so the things that are on top of the miniature are going to be lit more from the sun than the parts on the bottom. If you had a miniature that for some reason had a light source, well, so for instance, if it was nighttime and your only light source was a campfire, you'd do the reverse of this. You'd spray the miniature white or maybe an orange if it's firelight, and then spray them dark from above, and then you'd have your light emanating from the bottom of your miniature. But that's what we're doing when we zenithal prime something. We're just simulating the sun shining down on our figure. I'm almost done with this process here. Just going to do a couple more lines in a couple places. Places like the cloak, it can be a little rougher. As you can see, my lines are a little more ragged. And that's okay though, because it's a section of cloth. And that will just give us a little bit of added texture to the cloth. Get this boot here, and I think we're almost done. Just need to do his right arm and the part of the cloak that's kind of billowing out here. That'll work. And then I'm just going to get his right arm. And I'm not doing the sword because the sword is going to be in metallic paint. So we don't need to do this part because the metallic is just going to cover anything we do anyway. So, alright. So there's that step done. So you can see now we can clearly distinguish the three colors on him. The brown, which you can see there, the white that we sprayed from above, and then the white that we just laid down. So now we're going to move on to our actual colors. And I think I'm going to start with the cloak. And I'm going to use Black Templar for this. This is just the typical black contrast paint. And I'm going to do his cloak and his undershirt in this color. So I'm just going to come in here and cover it up. that. And then you might not be able to see it currently because the paint is still wet, but as the paint dries, you'll start to be able to see the three-toned nature of this process. And also this color we're using, the black, this is about the worst color to show this technique. But there'll be plenty of other browns and stuff on the rest of the miniature, so you'll be able to see it easier on those. But he does need a black cloak as part of the Night Watch. I mean, it's your miniature. If you were painting him, you paint him however you want. But I'm painting him sort of at least similar to how I think he appears, and how he does appear in the show, I guess. So like I've said before, with contrast paint, you're going to be very careful, especially with your darker colors, not to get it anywhere you don't want it, because you will not be able to go back over it with another contrast color, because, well, your other contrast colors are going to be lighter than this. And so it'll just show through. And especially having done all the work with the highlighting, we want to be very careful, because remaking the gradient and the highlight would be a pain in the butt. But this contrast paint does lend itself to being careful. It will flow into cracks instead of over other parts of the miniature. Miniatures with more definition help with this a lot. If you have details that are roughly the same depth, then it can be a problem. But because, like right here, the leg and the cloak are different depths, even if it runs down, it's just going to run into this crevice and won't get on the leg. At least we hope. Just going to get that part of the cloak there. Alright, there's the cloak done. It's still a little wet, but you can start to see the three-tone nature of this. So then I'm going to get this undershirt right here. Okay. And on his other arm, making sure not to get his gloves or his coat in the process. Missed the little spot right there. Alright. So there's that. So now I think I will do all the leather bits on him. Oh, wait. Forgot. There's part of his cloak around his hood, or around his neck rather. I need to do that in this same color. Actually, I'm going to do it because this is such a prominent part of the miniature. Even though it is technically the same piece of clothing as the cape, I'm actually going to do it in Basilicum Gray, which is, as you might imagine, a gray contrast paint. So it'll still be pretty dark, but it'll be lighter than the rest of the cloak. And so we'll get to see the highlights a little bit better. And like I said, because it's such a prominent part of the miniature being right up there near his face, that's why I'm choosing to do it this way. There we go. Alright, so then as you can see, the highlighting effect stands out much more. Click on that. So now I'm going to do, I think I'll do his, not sure what you'd call that, his gamison maybe? I don't know if it's actual gamison, but his little, the little short sleeve thing he's got right there. I'm going to do that thing, and I'm going to do that in Gore Grunta Brown, I think. This is, or Grunta Fur. Sort of like a deep red brown sort of color, and it'll stick out well, I think, against the other colors on him, but still be dark enough to maintain his dark Deathwatch theme. Deathwatch? We're not playing Warhammer. Night Watch. I hope I haven't said Death Watch this whole time. That'll be embarrassing. Night Watch. Alright, just make sure to get the inside folds of this. And then this inside fold also. Alrighty. And he's got a little bit of it back here behind the scabbard. And then, of course, the parts up here on his body. Alright. And after this step, I'm going to go do the leather on him. As I've said many times on this stream, it is my opinion that things that are not made of the same material should never be the same color. And so often, that means that two pieces of the same miniature are never the same color. In this case, we're going to do all his belts and scabbard and boots and stuff in the same color, because it's conceivable that they would all be made of the same leather. So normally I would make them all different colors, but in this case it makes logical sense for them to be the same color, and so we will stick to that. So I'm going to do that now. For that, I'm going to use a paint that no one else uses for leather. You'd never guess that this was a leather color. But, nonetheless, I'm going to use it as leather in this case. And I'm going to do the boots, the scabbard, the gloves, the belt across his chest, and any other leather that I happen to spot along the way here. And this is more of a yellow-brown, so it'll contrast nicely against the more red-brown that we did on his tunic. Make sure to get up on all these belts and his gloves here. Okay. And his scabbard, or his the hilt of his sword is right here, and as you can see, I'm getting this color all over it. But again, that will be a metallic color, so I'm not too worried about that. This metallic color will coat right over that. So there's that. No leather back here. This thing could be leather that he has going across there, and actually I am going to paint it like that, just to break up the sheep's wool on the back here. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but hopefully no one else watching or seeing this miniature on the table will know what it is either, and they'll just assume it's a leather strap. Hopefully it's not like some super key detail in the plot or something that I've missed. It's like, that's the leash of his former best friend's dog or something. Like, I don't know. These fantasy books have a way of adding tons of little tiny details that only the truest of fans pick up on, and I often miss them. I guess that means I'm not a true fan. Of course, after Season 8, I'm not sure if there are any true fans left. They may have lost them all. I just don't know. But I'm sure there are people out there who like Season 8, and if you're one of those people, nothing against you, but when you create something, fantasy universe, that is, in my opinion, objectively worse than the third Hobbit movie, you know you've messed up. You know you've messed up. Alright, so I'm going to do the sheepskin now on his back. And I want this to sort of be a pale yellow kind of color. but not exactly yellow, sort of an off-white yellow. So I'm going to take some Iyanden yellow, and I'm going to thin it down. I know, gasp, but not really. I'm just going to take my brush, dip it in the paint water I have here, so my brush is nice and wet, then dip it in the contrast paint. So on the brush is about a 50-50 water to contrast paint, and then I'll just brush it onto the sheepskin here. Good looking guy there. Could be talking about me, could be talking about the miniature. We'll never know. Oh, never mind, I had selfie cam open. Wow. That's good. That's good. So yeah, I'm just putting this 50-50 water and yellow mix on the sheepskin here. Just dipping my, and again, not exactly a 50-50 mix. I'm just dipping my brush in the water, then dipping it in the paint. And that's giving me a rough mix. If it starts to come out too orange like it did there, I just grab some more water and mix it around. Make sure to get it down in here. I want to hear more Greg rants about fantasy movies and shows. Well, I know one that for some reason, like, really, really gets people. I absolutely, positively found no redeeming qualities in Farscape. And apparently everyone else did. Everyone else seems to love Farscape. I just could not get into it at all. And that's one of the things, like, basically, like, as special as we all like to think we are, I'm not that special when it comes to my likes. I like the Lord of the Rings movies. I like Star Wars. Like, yeah, I'm not that fancy. I like Stargate SG-1. But Farscape, apparently, I just am out on a raft in the ocean alone when it comes to Farscape. So now I'm going to do his skin, I think, just to get that drying, so I can come back and do the eyes, potentially. For that, I'm going to use Guilliman Flesh. He's in the Night Watch. I don't know how long he's been in the Night Watch in this exact instance, but I'll say it's been a while. So he's probably got pretty pale skin, living inside a lot at the wall. So this is a pretty pale color. And because of the nature of our priming method, we may need to come in and lighten up his skin even a little bit more with some actual contrast or actual layer paint, because there may just be a little bit too much brown on the skin there. But maybe not. It might work once it's all dried and said and done. Alright, so then we just have his hair, his pants. Oh, he's got a little bit of fur, I realized, around the boots there. So I'm going to grab this Iyanden yellow back and just same thing, get the brush wet, get a little bit of the contrast paint on here, roughly a 50-50 mix, and just paint this little bit here. Alright, there we go. Alright, now we will think about his pants. I need it, I don't need it, I would like it to be a pretty dark color. So I didn't pull out a darker brown, so let me pull one out real quick. I think this will work. I'm going to use Wildwood. Pretty dark brown, second darkest brown in the contrast line. So we'll go with that. And I said I wanted it to be dark because we had two different patterns going here. We had dark, light, dark, or rather this will complete two patterns for us. We have the darker boots, then the lighter fur, and then now we have the darker pants. We also have the light fur, and now we're adding the darker pants, and then the lighter gambeson or cloak or shirt, whatever it is. And you don't always need to paint, and in fact, it's probably best to not always paint dark light, dark light, dark light. But on a simple paint job like this, it helps add a little bit of flavor. So now I'm going to do his hair. And I'm going to do his hair in the same color as the cloak, this Black Templar. However, I'm going to do the same trick I did with the yellow and thin it down just a little bit. This will mean that it's darker than the Basilicum Gray on the that we did right here, but lighter than the black on the cloak, if I did this correctly. So just going to put this on here. Yep, and that's working out just fine. And again, that's just not drying the brush off completely or dipping it fresh in the water and then putting it in the contrast paint. Then on your brush, you have a roughly 50-50 mix of contrast paint and water. And if you were really going to thin down contrast paint, you shouldn't use water because it alters the surface tension and all this other stuff. But for our purposes, it's just fine. So there you go. As you can see, oh, that was off camera, my bad. So as you can see now, we have the darkest cloak here, slightly lighter hair, and then lighter again for this part right here. And that's exactly what we wanted. So we just have the metallic parts left, and to finish the sheepskin back here, I'll do that sheepskin finisher right now. I'm going to just take some Apothecary White. It's the white contrast paint. It really comes out more gray than white, but that will work for us. I'm just giving it a good shake. Contrast paint does like to settle, and if it settles and you don't remix it, the properties of the paint will change and you will not get the results you want. So you want to make sure to shake it up until, let me see if I can find an unshaken one here. So like this, let's see, I just used this. So as you can see, there's just a little bit of a lighter color at the bottom there. This is completely light on the bottom there. So then we give it a shake until all of that light color goes away. As you can see, there's still a little bit right there. So we just keep shaking. And there we go. And now we know that our paint is properly mixed. It's technically a bug because paint shouldn't be separating like that, but it's almost a feature because it tells you when it's properly shaken. Layer paint, you can't ever tell. Granted, layer paint, you can just close it up and shake it more. However, it's a nice little thing, I guess, to know exactly when you're done shaking your paint. So I'm just going to put this gray, this white over this. Some of the yellow will come through this, some won't. And that'll give us a nice sort of dirty sheepskin looking thing. Just making sure it doesn't pool too much. We don't want the gray. We don't want pools of gray, really. We just want the brown of the undercoat and the yellow, like, dulled down, basically. And this is a good way to do it with contrast paint. Alright, just need to get this down here. There we go. And as you can see, I left this part a little more yellow than this part. It's because it's near the top of the model where it would be the brightest. So, there we go. So that's our sheepskin down there. So then we just have the metallic parts. So I'm just going to use a single metallic paint for this. Assuming I can find it. Just used it not too long ago. There it is. So I'm going to use some Iron Breaker, sort of your medium silver color. I'm going to put this all over every metal bit, and then I'm going to come back with contrast paint and put different contrast paints on different metallic pieces to make some of the metal different than the rest. So just doing this all on the sword. Oh, almost off camera. And then we're going to find the belt buckles and do them. And I think there's some bits on his scabbard that are probably metal. But they may just be leather. I'll have to check. So there's his sword. Just make sure the edge is also silver. Sorry about that. My phone is a phone that I'm recording with is the company that runs the biggest search engine in the world. I won't say it because apparently something it heard sounded like it, and so it pulled up the assistant and was like, "What would you like to search for?" Nothing. I don't want to search for anything. I want to paint my miniature. Thanks. All right. So the sword is done. So I'm just going to pick out now the belt buckles. Anything else? So we got a... No, that's probably leather also. This belt buckle here, though, is definitely metallic. And then this bit up here is probably metal. There. And then down here, I believe this part is metal also. Alrighty. So then, as soon as I get this done, so then we're going to have 3 different types of metal on this guy. On Jon, sorry, he has a name. We're going to have the super shiny silver that is his sword, the dulled, more not polished silver that is the handle and hilt of his sword, and then we're going to have some bronze on the scabbard here. So I painted the hilt and handle of the sword first, so I'm going to start with that. I'm just going to take some of the basilicum gray that we used earlier. And just cover the whole thing here in this basilicum gray. It'll just tone it down just a tiny bit. I'm also going to do it on this belt buckle here. Just a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. And then to make the sword look like it is weathered a little bit but not crazy, I'm just going to flip this guy upside down here and then run a thin line of the basilicum gray just in the groove of the sword here. This groove has a name, but for the life of me I cannot remember it. It's going to bug me. It has a specific name. Don't know what it is though. Whatever, it'll come to me eventually. Alright, so then we're going to go to the parts on his scabbard. I'm going to use for this Fireslayer Flesh. This is sort of like the Darkoath we used on his shirt, but slightly thinner, less pigmented. So over the silver will give us a nice bronze looking color, which is what we're going for. So just going to cover straight over the silver like that. Same thing up here. Like that. There we go. Alrighty. And then, unless I really wanted to paint the eyes, which I don't really, the shading will take care of that for us. I could put a little bit of ink in there. I'll put just a tiny little bit of basilicum gray in the eyeballs there. Just to make them a little darker than the skin around them. There we go. There we go. And I guess I'll line his mouth also. And just under the nose there. There we go. So now his face is a little more to it. So then we're basically done at this point. I see a little nick in the black here. I'm just going to fix that up on the cloak. And then the next step is you can either leave it like this, or you can take a dry brush and very, 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 very lightly, the lightest dry brush you've ever done, you can dry brush an off-white all over him. I think I'm going to. It might ruin the paint job, but it's a risk I'm willing to take. So I'm going to take a dry brush. like this. And I'm going to find an off-white color. So I'll use Wraithbone in this case, I think. Actually, I'm going to use a slightly darker color. I'm going to use Rakarth Flesh. So, I'm going to get some of this on my brush. So, got some on my brush, and then I'm going to wipe it off as much as I possibly can. And normally in dry brushing, you wipe off a lot of paint. In this case, I'm going to wipe off even more. I want there to be so little paint on this brush that it almost doesn't look like there is any paint on it. That looks pretty good. So there you go. As you can see, you can barely tell that there's some paint on there. And then we're going to very gently start dry brushing just along the edges of things like this. So on the edge of the cloak here. And as you build it up, you'll eventually start to see it show up. Just like this. Very gently. You don't want to rub off any of your paint. Just kind of go all over the front of him here. Again, very gently. Like I said, this absolutely, if you do it wrong, this absolutely can ruin a paint job. So if you do this, you want to be very careful. Lighter is always better. You can always add more later. I think that will about do it for this. So yeah, there he is in all his glory. Decent paint job for basically no hard work. Just highlight the whole miniature with white, and then put some colors on it and call it a day. I could do his base real quick. I suppose I will. I'm going to do a super simple base because he is in the Night Watch, as I said. And so he's got about 46 other miniatures that I need to paint up with him to field that army. So I don't want to be doing a super complicated base on him and then having to match that on the rest of them. So I am just going to take some. The question is, do I want him to be? Yeah, I'll do him in a snow situation here. So I'm going to take some of the Cygor brown again, that dark brown we used. And I'm just going to coat the base in it. Like this. Making sure not to get too much on his boots here. I guess I should be on screen, huh? Just like that. Doesn't have to be perfect coverage. Just has to be. You want to cover up the primer. You don't want too much of that, or any of that really, showing through. Alright. There's that. The parts of the base that are being held by the holder will need to be touched up. That's okay, I can do that another time. Being in the holder is much more convenient for right now. So then I'm going to grab some tufts. These little grass things here. These are winter tufts, specifically. Since we are doing a winter scene here. That's what I'll use. And I'm just going to grab one or two or maybe more. Put a little dab of super glue on the bottom of them. Pull out my super glue here. So you just have your tuft and a little, they're self-adhesive. So just a little tiny bit of super glue there is all they really need to help. And then I'll just plop this down here. Make sure it's nice and stuck. And I'll do that again varying up the size of these things. Just a little tiny drop. And then stick it on there. Make sure it's stuck on really well. I think I'll do one more on the back here. Go for a medium size this time. Little drop of super glue. And right on in there. Alright, so there's that. Then we just need to wait for our contrast paint to dry before we do this next step. And I will do that by just whipping out the hairdryer real quick. This might be slightly loud. I apologize if it is, but it'll be quick. Alright, so now our contrast paint's all dry. Then we're going to take some Valhalla Blizzard, which is just a texture paint that is meant to mimic snow. Just going to get some out. I'm going to use this little scooper tool here. Just get some out. And then I'm just going to lay it down on the base here, making sure to get some in the tops of the tufts, because snow doesn't discriminate. It falls wherever it wants to. So I'm just going to put some in there. This is really as much or as little as you want to do with this sort of thing. I'm going to do a fair bit of it. Well, a little bit of that paint wasn't dry yet. It's okay. A little bit of brown snow is not going to hurt anybody. Just put some more on top of it. There we go. It'll just look like dirty snow. Not a big deal, which, especially if he's on a battlefield, probably would be dirty. So then I'm just going to put a little bit more. But yeah, what I was saying is I'm going to put a little bit more snow than less snow, just because I only did a base coat of color on this base. So I don't want to have that showing too much, so it'll be easily picked up on. Now I just want to texture the paint around like this, so that you get some spots that are completely white, some spots that are a little more uneven. Just get in there. A little more snow up here on the tuft, I think. There we go. Just make sure it's all flattened down. Alright. And there is his snow base. So zoom out a little bit. And there he is done. Quick and easy. I'm not sure how long that was. Let's see. 45 minutes. And that's a character, so I spent a little more time on him. If you were doing a unit like this, you could whip them out super quick. Not a problem. Especially because they probably have less detail than he does. Just getting a little bit of snow off his cape here. There we go. So yeah, that'll do it for this episode. I will be back here same time next week. Otherwise, I'll be in the 40K group on Friday, working on my game mat, hopefully finishing, we'll see. And then next Monday, something Warhammer related, we'll see. And then, like I said, back here next week, same time, for something else more beginner focused. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.